Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. Today we are going to talk about perspectives and the type of perspective that we are commonly using for drawing. So when it comes to perspective in drawing, perspectives are really important to understand how shapes are formed and what the 1 point perspective means, what 2 point or 3 point perspectives means, which dramatically helps us to really understand how to draw and to form shapes on paper. Doesn't matter from which angle we look at it, we will be able to understand how to start putting the first lines that will end up helping us to reform or to form the objects properly with the right proportions. So when it comes to perspective, we have three types of perspectives. So we have the 1 point perspectives, we have the 2 point perspectives, and we have 3 point perspective. These three perspectives are meant to help us to draw any perspective we need. But there is a huge difference between 1 point perspective, 2 point, and 3 point. So 1 point perspective is actually or indicates exactly what the name tells us. Like 1 point perspective means we are going to use only 1 point to form shapes or to draw shapes, objects. It doesn't matter if the object is simple or complex, you will be able to do it once you understand how to use these kind of methods. So the first point perspective, as we said, it actually uses, as the name says here, 1 point. It uses 1 point. So you can call it one perspective point, or you can call it one vanish point. So some people, or like some artists, call it vanishing point, or perspective points. Both are the same. So 1 point perspective, for example, if you want to draw like this cube, right? But as you see here, I just like draw it very randomly without using any perspective, without really paying attention about the proportions, if they are like a properly drawn or not. So to use this perspective, we first need 1 point. So we draw 1 point. Then, for example, when it comes to drawing this box, if we draw like this line and this line very randomly, okay, for now, at least for now, yeah. So if we have these lines, which I drew really randomly for now, at least, yeah. So we are going to put a line in this direction, which is like completely horizontal, and another line, and another line. Of course, I'm gonna explain why I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm just gonna give you an overview what 1 point perspective is. So if we draw like lines here, yeah, so we have now, as you see, this is the first shape, right? So if we draw now, instead of horizontal, we draw vertical. As you see, we now have this box. It looks a little bit different, but just like to give you an idea how this box looks like when we use a proper perspective. See, like we just start with this point, and we draw lines like this. And let's say we have a box here, right? Then I put my horizontal line, which is this one, and another one, this one, and I just connect these lines, which actually these or which were reformed or created by these lines using this vanishing point, you know. So I'm just like now only connecting these lines. So now I have like the top surface of the box, right? So as you remember, we have these 100% vertical lines, right? So these I can use by starting from this point and draw a line, starting from this point and draw a line, and the same goes for here. So let's say our box ends this way, right? So now I have again my horizontal line. So if we connect this point and this point, so these four, we now have, as you see, the second surface of the cube. So, but this cube still needs the third and the fourth. So all surfaces, you know. So what I want to do now, I just connect this vanishing point to this point. So once I connect it, as you see, it automatically gives me this side surface of the box. So once I connect it, I just highlight my lines, and as you see, we now have the cube in a proper way with the right proportions using only 1 point perspective. I'm gonna give few examples using these perspectives in another page, but yeah, let's have another overview, like quick overview about the 2-point perspective and the 3-point perspective. Afterwards, I'm gonna explain in details how to treat these. Yeah, this is just like a rough explanation to give you an idea what is really about. So the 2nd-point perspective is actually pretty similar to the 1-point perspective. Instead, we are going to use 2 points and not only points. So let's say we have this one vanishing point, let's call it A, and we have the vanishing point, let's call it B, right? So now we have 2 points. So let's say we want to draw a box right here. So now, just to understand how this perspective method works, I'm gonna draw random lines, right? So for example, I want to draw like this one, starting from point A, sorry, and I'm gonna draw another line from point B to cross point A. So now we have 2 lines. So we now draw another line, which is also from point A and from point B, the same. So as you see, where the points are crossing each other, we have the first surface of our box. Let me highlight it to make it easier to see. So now we have the first surface. As you remember here, we need our verticals and horizontal lines. So we draw our horizontal lines or vertical lines randomly like this, just to help me understand where our box starts and where it ends. These are called helper line, which means they are not going to be like a main lines of your object, but they are just like helping you to reform the shape in a proper way with the right proportion. That's why I'm like not brushing or like not pressing my pen too much, because I'm gonna delete these lines because they are just like helpers to help you to draw your object with the right proportions. So now I have these lines. Let's say our box is gonna be like, for example, like this. Now I'm choosing the size, by the way, like for example here or here or here randomly, just to explain to you how it works. But after that, sizes, proportions, everything matters actually. Yeah, it depends on what exactly are you drawing, you know. So for now, let's say here, for example. So now I connect this line, this point and this point together, as you see. Now we have this surface, this line. So now I connect point A to this point and point B. And as you see, let me just like jump into one very quick comment. So as you see here, I'm not using any ruler per se. I don't even have a ruler actually, but like ruler helps you to draw very straight lines. That's true, yeah. But when it comes to drawing, I highly recommend you to try not to use ruler at all. And it's really okay to, for example, to have this kind of line at the beginning, not very straight, instead of using a ruler. Why? Because the more you practice, your line will be improved. See? So this practice is actually very simple, but it has a huge effect. Trust me on this. So if you feel like your hand is still not too strong to put really like straight lines, or you don't trust yourself to really not use a ruler, try this practice and try to make it as straight as possible and as fast as possible. Of course, not super fast. Of course, you need to still control your pain, but I don't recommend you to, if you want to try or if you want to try to draw like straight line, I don't recommend you to do this very slow, because this way you might get a straight line. Yes, that's true, but your hand will still like not as strong as it's supposed to be. So when you draw a little bit faster, first, your hand will be improved, and second, your confidence will be much higher to draw lines without using any ruler, or without anything. So this is like one small comment I wanted to give you. Going back to our example. So we stopped right here. So we connected point A to this point and point B to this point. So as you see, we now have this and this line. But we are not going to draw everything yet. We wait a little bit. So as you see, when we draw this line from point B to this one, we now have this line, right? So this line, it actually crosses this line and this line. But what we need from these two lines is actually this point. Why? Because this line is actually behind in the back side, so it's not really visible. Which visible, the face that is, or the surface which is visible is actually this one. And this one is actually, if I just like highlight a little bit for you, this is the back side. It's not really visible. So now we have this point and this point, and we can now confidently highlight this line. So now we have this surface and the top surface. So after having this point, we can easily now connect it to point A, right? Once we connect it, again, this line crosses this line, which is the vertical one. So once I connect them, it automatically gives me the cube that we need using the 2 points perspective and in the very proper right proportions, as you see. So if I'm going to be highlighting it a little bit to make it a little bit visible for you. So this is surface A. And this is surface B. And of course, the top part and the bottom part and the back part are not visible, because what we see here from this cube is actually only these two. So of course, I'm gonna explain afterwards so how to control this. If you wanna be looking at this box from this angle or from the bottom, maybe this is something I'm gonna explain afterwards. Don't worry. So now it's really only about to give a rough overview about these three common perspective methods. Of course, by the way, there are a little bit more complex perspective types in drawing, right? Like besides point 1, 2, and 3. But these are way too complex, and these are for really advanced levels. So if you want to really understand perspectives and something to really start with, I highly recommend you to first understand these points. Of course, the more complex levels, the advanced one, I'm gonna explain it afterwards, but not in this session. This session is like for the very first knowledge about perspectives and how to really start and understand these methods. So the third point is actually combines the method 1 and method 2, and in addition we use third point. So for example, let's say we have this line, right? We have 1 point, 2 point, so let's stay with this naming convention. So point A, point B, and we need a point C, which is actually the third one. So the third one might be here, might be on the top, might be on the bottom. It depends on where are you looking at your cube from. So from the top or from horizontal view or from the bottom. This is something I'm gonna explain next, okay? So let's say our C point, which is the third one, is on the bottom. So as you see, we can start as we did here to draw a random line and another line and another line and another line. As you notice, I am kind of like always starting with 4 lines, sorry, because it kind of like gives us the first surface of the cube, which dramatically helps you to understand how to move on, and control your shape. So now let's say our point C is here. Okay, I just moved it a little bit because it needs to be a little bit aligned with the lines. So anyway, you will understand afterwards what I mean. So as you see, what we did here for point 2, also for perspective 2 points perspective, we were using the vertical and horizontal lines. For the third point perspective, we don't use the vertical lines, but we use the lines that are created by point C. I'm gonna explain what exactly I mean. So for example, if I connect now these 4 points that are generated by point A and P to this point C, let me show you what happens. So this is my first line, just straight line. This is my second line, this is my third line, and this is my fourth line. So as you see, now we have 4 lines, and don't get confused. I know this 3-point perspective is a little bit a little bit complex than these two, but once you understand it, it's actually not that complex. So as you see here, and please don't get confused, we have now way too many lines. So let's just highlight our 4-point line, our 4 points, yeah, because they are really important now to understand. So now we have the lines, right? Let's say our cube ends here, like this kind of size, yeah? I put a point here, simply, yeah, and I connect these points to A and B, exactly as we did here. And as you see, once I have these two lines, it automatically creates the points that we need to connect with each other. So this point is actually aligning with this point. This point is aligning with this point. This point is aligning with this point, which is actually the backside. Again, it's not visible for us. And this point is aligning with this point, right? So now if I want to create, just like connect these dots, these points to each other, as we did here, let me show you. See? So now it actually creates this cube for us as if we are looking at it from the bottom, which is kind of like not an easy perspective to draw, by the way. So this shape is much more complex than this, because this is kind of equal, as you see, like vertical and horizontal, and that's it. Especially these lines, they are like 100% vertical. But for 3-point perspective, once we have the 3rd point perspective, as the 3rd point in our perspective, it means our shape will be more complex. Because why? Because it actually, like, we are adding one additional perspective point or vanishing point to our perspective, which gives us like more accurate shape and more accurate perspective and proportions. So it becomes more realistic. So this one, for example, it exactly is as if I were, or we were looking at it from the bottom to the top, you know, which is kind of like realistic if we are talking about realistic, like physically speaking. And this is exactly what makes this type, a perspective type, is a little bit more complex, because it actually brings us a little bit closer to the reality. So let me just quickly highlight these surfaces to show you how it looks. And this one. And this is point A, point B, and point C. So let me also highlight this one to make them kind of unique to understand what's going on. This one is a little bit small, so excuse me. I'm gonna give a few examples afterwards for each perspective type, okay? So don't worry. So as I said, these are the 3 most common perspective types or methods that we are using in the drawing world. So now I'm gonna explain a little bit further, because actually this is the very, very basic of perspective, but it might get way more complex, way more realistic, and a little bit tough to understand. But step by step. If you do it step by step, you will be able to really grasp the idea and to really understand how to use these methods. So let's move to another example. I'm gonna stick with these three types, by the way, for today. So I'm just gonna give like another helpful information, because as I said in the previous page, it depends. So the perspective hugely depends on where are you looking at your object. Doesn't matter if it's a sphere or if it's a cube or if it's anything, if it's a human, if it's a building. It really hugely depends on where are you looking at it. Are you looking at it from the top? Are you looking at it from the horizontal view? Are you looking at it from the bottom? Are you looking at it exactly from the top? So these kind of things defines our perspective and our lines. So let me give you a few examples. For examples, let me maybe pick another pen. Just 1 second. Yeah, this one is okay. So I think we can try this one. Give me 1 second. Yeah, this one's okay. So to reduce any confusion, I'm gonna use this white paper, okay? Not the one with the lines. So, yeah. So let's start with few examples. For examples, so if we are, let me just first, sorry. Give you the first examples. So if we are, let's assume we have a wall here, for example, okay? Let me just move it a little bit. Let's assume we have a wall here, okay? And someone is standing here. Let me make it a little bit darker. So someone is standing here. So this is the head, and this person is looking at the box. Let's stay with the box example, okay? Because this is the basic shape that we can start with. So this person is looking at the box from this area. So he is standing on the wall, and this is the ground, our ground. So this is a ground, and this is the eye, the human eye. So we draw a line to help us keep tracking the human eye perspective. So this eye is actually looking at this direction. So it means this line is gonna be looking at this direction. With so the human eye itself, sorry to give you just a quick information, the human eye is actually able to see 95-degree field of view. So it means the human eye, for example, this is the human eye, right? Just assume, okay? So the human eye is able to see 95-degree field of view, and that's it. So it means our eye can be moved a little, or rotate, or orbit, or it can be orbiting 45-degree up and 45-degree, approximately 45-degree down. So this way and this way, and of course to the left and right. So it means, assuming this person is standing right here and this is the head, it means the center of the human, so his eyes, is gonna be looking like this area, like exactly horizontal. So now we have the ground line and we have the human eye line. So the human eye line is actually the line where we start putting our perspective or vanishing points. Let's take for this example the 2-point perspective, okay? Because this makes us much easier, so makes it for us much easier to understand. So 2-point perspectives, okay? So let's say the vanishing points are here and here. So you might ask yourself, why not here or here? This is completely okay. So this is up to you where to put it. If the vanishing points are here or here or a little bit further, it's up to you. For now, it doesn't matter really. What matters is actually your vanishing point should be exactly on the line of the human eye view, field of view, which is actually this line. So now we have the second line, which is going to also helps us where our box, our cube is sitting, the ground line. So let's say the ground line, for example, our box is gonna be ending like here, okay? So our box needs to end, the closest point to us should be exactly on the ground. Physically speaking, it should be on the ground because it is actually touching the ground. The cube is fully sitting on the ground, and the closest point to us should be drawn exactly on this line. So now if we connect this one to and this one, let's stay with A and B, okay? So this point to point A and this point to point B, we have two lines. So if we now draw as we did for the 2-point perspective, we have these vertical lines, as you know. I'm just assuming our box is like this. I can make it a little bit smaller. It's not a big deal really. So the main idea is just to understand what these lines are, not where these lines are. So we have these horizontal lines because, as we said, for the 2-point perspective, we use the verticals and horizontal lines as a second helpers. So now, as you see, we just now draw our vertical lines. Now we have these lines and 1, 2, 3, the vertical ones. So now let's say our box ends here. So we draw a line connecting these 2 points, and we connect also again this point to point A. As you see, now we have this and this and this surfaces. It's also recommended to do as I did here, to highlight some lines. Once you have lines already generated by these perspectives, it is sometimes helpful to highlight them a little bit to give you like more understanding how your shape is going to be looking like, and to reduce some confusions, because as you see, the more lines we put, the more difficult or complex the shape it gets. So now we have these. but we still need the top part, right, of the box. So what we do actually now, so now we have this point and this point and this point. Where I am getting these points, they are actually the points that are generated by this line, right? So now we have 1.3. So now I connect this line to B, to point B. Oh, sorry. And this line this point to B as well. And now I connect this point to A again. So as you see, now I used too many lines. Sorry if I caused any confusion, but let me just highlight it quickly. So this point is actually created by this line, and this point is created by point P, and this one is created by point B. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me just highlight it quickly for you. As you see, now we have the full cube, and the human field of view, which is this one, is also taking into consideration. So if the human is sitting on this wall or standing on this wall and standing on this specific height, the box or the cube is gonna look like this, because he is like kind of above the box or above the cube, which makes him looking at this cube from the top. So this is the first part, as you see, and this is the second part, and this is the third. So the message that I want to deliver to you with this is, where I said the angle that you are looking at it at an object from is way too important, really important, because this defines how your shape is going to look like, or how your object is going to look like, and the proportion of it, you know. So let's take another example, like another angle of this human being. For example, so if we let me use the white paper again, sorry. So maybe we can use it this way to kind of like explain a little bit more. So the second example, let's take, for example, this human. This is our ground, okay? Again, this is the ground, and this is the human. But now in this example, the human is actually standing normally on the ground without standing on top of anything, okay? So this is our human, and this is the head, and this is the field of view, or the human field of view, the human eye field of view. So as we did in the last section, we draw a line, okay? So we have the field of view, FOV, you can shorten it, and we have the ground, 2 lines. So now we are also taking 2-point perspective, okay? Because actually, in my experience, I would say 2-point perspectives is the most common used perspective that helps you draw almost everything, but not everything. Okay, so now the human is standing on the floor. So we have now our 2 points, point A and point B. Okay, so we again defined the closest point to us by defining a point on the ground, which is this one, and I draw lines directly, immediately, like vertical lines, and I connect A to the ground point and B again to that point as well. So let's say we have our box ending here. So we define the random point. Why I'm saying random? Because we are just like explaining how it works, okay? But when we wanna like draw specific items like this one, for example, we need to take everything into consideration, how this part looks like size-wise in compared to this, or this to this, right? But now I'm saying random only because it's just an example to understand the method itself, okay? So we have the point now. We draw our vertical line again, and now we connect A to this point, exactly as we did in the last section. And this point is now created. We connect it to B, right? So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and our vertical line, of course, 6. So we have already 6 points, which are super helpful already. Like, we connect them now. And now we connect this one to B. And this one to A. Which automatically gives us the right proportions of our cube. As you see, we have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 visible points to us. The 8th one, which is actually this one, is in the back side. It's not visible for us because we are looking at it from this one, from this perspective. So as you see, now we have the cube, assuming that this human being is actually standing and looking at it from this angle. So we can also assume that the box is a little bit bigger. So if we assume that, staying on this example, okay, if we assume that the box is way too tall, like this one, for example, it's gonna end like this. So now we have this line, right? So if we connect now this point to A and this point to B, nothing changes actually. It's just like the cube is much bigger, and the surfaces that this human being was able to see is not able anymore, because the top part is way too high now, because the cube is bigger than this human being, right? So now I connect my dots, 1, 2, 3. I highlight them. Let me just highlight it quickly to help you understand what's going on. As you see now, this human is not able to see the top part of the box because of the cube, because the cube is way bigger now, right? But even though I'm still able to really draw this cube in the right proportion. Why? Because my dots are accurate and my lines also are accurate as well, which helps me to eventually get the right proportions. So another example, we are staying with the cube and 2-point perspective, okay? We are not changing the topic per se, but what we need to consider is also like another example, taking this human being. For example, this is the, let me just make it a little bit lower. This is the ground, okay? I will call it just G, okay? And our friend now sits on the floor, not standing, okay, anymore. Yeah, let's assume he is just sitting on the floor now. So it means his eyes is much lower now in compared to this example. So we draw a line again. So we draw our 2 important points. As you see, the distance between his eyes and the floor is now much closer and much shorter in compared to this one, right? Because physically speaking is accurate, is logically speaking, it should be shorter because he is sitting now, and that's why the distance between these 2 lines is much shorter now, okay? So we draw our 2 lines, nothing changes for A and B at all. And we stay with this point. Let's say our point ends here. Yeah. We connect A to this point. Again, exactly as we did here. Nothing changes. B to this point. And we have our vertical line. Sorry, just 1 second. And let's say our box ends here, okay? Now we connect A to this point, and we connect this point to B as well. So following this example, if we draw a line, like for example, if we want to draw like the exact same cube, the same size, and everything is the same, right? But only the angle of the human eye perspective changes, we can draw this line actually and use it. And we can draw this line and use it as well. So as you see, now we have 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. So if we connect all points together, it immediately gives us our cube, and 100% accurate, and the proportions are correct as well. As you see, this at the top part of the cube is very much scaled to the top, like it's too much scaled, because even if you in real life, if you look at something from the bottom to the top, like this angle, okay, like this, from the top to the bottom, it will look scaled up a little bit from the top, because physically speaking, this is how the human eye works. Because the human eye, when I don't want to deep dive into details now, because this is really much like very much for beginners and just to start understanding perspectives. But of course, for advanced sessions, I'm going to explain everything in much more detailed sessions afterwards, but not for today, okay? So the human eye, as I said, is able to, let's say this is our human eye, okay, is able actually to open 95-degree field of view. It means this 95-degree are able to move on the Z axis up or down, or left or right. So that's why, and this angle is actually this one, which is automatically generated by point A and B. So physically speaking, this human being is not able to see the backside because physically it doesn't work, right? You can take this example in your real life daily habits, like look at a building or a car or very simple things in your apartment, right? You will not be able to see the backside of any object because physically it doesn't work, right? And that's why the human eye has a limitation, and this limitation are defined by the perspective points or the vanishing points. And that's actually why it's called vanishing point, because it start to vanish and it start to be or you will start to not be able to see anymore what's there. So anyway, without diving into too much details into like human eye and anatomy, and which can be covered of course in later on, so this is what you need to know for today. Okay, so and that's why it looks scaled. So here is not scaled that much because it's closer to us, and this one is much more scaled because it's actually much further to the human eye in compared to this one. So let me just highlight it quickly again. Okay, so we have two other options or two other examples as well. I'm gonna try to make it quick as well. So the third example is, we assume that it's gonna be a little bit funny, but let's say it like we have a hole, and the human eye is the human me is actually inside the ground. Maybe I will lower it down a little bit, sorry, because I need this space, the top part. So if we now have this, okay, so this is the hole. Let's assume we have a hole, okay, and the human is exactly like this is the hole, sorry, and this is the ground, and the human is actually inside the ground. Why I'm doing this? Because I want to tell you, like for example, this is the body and this is the head. I want to show you how the perspective looks like if the human eye is actually way too lower in compared to these examples. Okay, so this is the human head. You just make it look as a whole. Okay, and this is the floor with the floor line, which I am also going to be using. Let me just delete this to not make you confused. This ground line is going to be used also for the human being, because it actually, let's assume his head is like here. Okay, so he is looking at the cube from the very same perspective or the very same horizontal line of the ground. That's why I'm going to use only one line for this one. So now we have point A and point B. Okay, and we have our closest point, which is again this one. Okay, so now we draw our vertical line, and let's say the box ends here. Let's use the right proportion. So I'm just drawing like a line from here to this point to help me define my point on the top part. So now we have this point. Now we connect to B and A again, and we have these points which actually on the right and the left, and we draw our vertical lines. So now, as you see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, now again we connect these lines together. And as you see, now we have our cube and it looks kind of like a flat here. And physically speaking, it is actually correct. It's correct and accurate. Why? Because the human eye is looking at the box at the very same line heights of the ground. And that's why we don't see any depths here. See, like in compared to this is gonna be looking flat, way like 100% flat, because the human eye is actually on the ground, way too low. And this is exactly how it will look like. And using 2 points perspective helps me to immediately and very quickly define my cube. As you see, let me highlight it again. See? So now we have it using 2 points perspective as well. So the last example I'm gonna give here is assuming the hole is, again with the hole, okay? Assuming the hole is here and our hole is actually on the ground, as we said here. And the human is actually completely under the ground, like inside the hole and completely on the ground. Like, let's assume his head is here, okay, and this is the body. So we draw a line again for his eyes, which is this one. So as you see now, the human eye is completely under or below the horizontal line, the ground line. So nothing changes in that regard. We start again with point A and point B. We have our aim point as well. I'm using these lines, by the way. You can just like make them continuing, which helps you define your horizontal lines, right? So I don't want to change the order of our process and workflow. So after using this or putting this point, we connect A as we did. We connect this point to B as well. And we draw our line, which is the horizontal one, the vertical one, sorry. And we connect, so this point to B, and we connect to A again. But now you have to be a little bit careful, because this perspective is kind of difficult. Why? Because we are physically looking at the box from the bottom, you know? So all of these top area is exactly like invisible, 100% invisible. So which is gonna be visible is actually the bottom part. And this is something we need to take into consideration. So the way of doing it is, we have this line. Just bear with me a little bit. This one is a little bit complicated, a little bit, but doable. So we have our lines here, we have our line here, right? So we have point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But this time we don't need these two. Why? I'm gonna explain why. So this line, when we draw it, it creates this point and this point as well. And this is actually the points that we are going to use for the bottom part. Why? Because as I said, the human eye height is way too lower than usual. So if we connect now, this point Just 1 second. This point to this point, and just bear with me a little bit. I'm gonna explain it to you. So this is our main point, right? We made a mistake here. So point A and B, yeah, I'm gonna redraw it because it's gonna be much easier to fix instead of fixing it. So the mistake, let me tell you the mistake I did. The mistake I did is actually I draw my A and B points on the ground, which is a bad start, because our your A and B lines needs to be on the line of the human eye perspective, human eye field of view. So it's fully okay to make mistakes, so don't be afraid. Yeah, so even me after years of experience, sometimes I make mistakes. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. But most importantly, you need to know how to fix these mistakes to avoid remaking them again, right? So I'm gonna recap quickly here. This is, let me make it a little bit lower. Like, this is the hole, this is the ground, and this is the human eye. So we have our point, vanishing point A and B, and we have our main lines, main points, which should be of the cube, which should be, as I said before, sitting on the ground, right? So we connect A to B, to A to this point, and B to this point. And now we draw our vertical lines because we need this. Now, let's say our cube ends here. We connect B to this point and A to this point. And now we connect. Let me highlight this line again and this line again because we need them. We draw now our second vertical line and third vertical line. And now we connect. So we have this point and this point, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we connect this point to B. Nothing changes, exactly as we did there. And this point to A. So as you see, now we have this surface, which is actually the bottom part of our box. This one. Right? As you see, now the human is actually completely below the floor, our ground, so he is able now to see the full bottom part of the bottom side of the box, as you see here. And this is, this perspective is useful for some cases. Actually, you use it a lot, but without noticing. Like, for example, if you walk on the street and you see an airplane, for example, okay, or like a bird or anything. So this is exactly the same example, because you are going to be looking at the airplane from a lower level, from a lower perspective or lower height in compared to the airplane, because the airplane is gonna be here and you're gonna be here. So this is exactly the same example. This is exactly the same perspective point or vanishing point that applies in this example, because also our friend here is looking at the cube from the bottom. So yeah, I think this is the most common examples that kind of like describes and explains perspectives. Of course, as I said in the very beginning of our video, drawing perspective is not easy, but doable. It's doable, but you really have to understand what first point perspective means, what 2-point perspective means, and what third point perspective means, you know? Because only after understanding that you will be able to really imagine how your object's gonna be looking like, even before finishing drawing. As you notice, like while I was drawing here, I was like kind of highlighting some lines. Meanwhile, before finishing everything. Why? Because this skill you will gain definitely. The more you draw, the more you will gain this skill, which is actually being able to really imagine how your shape is gonna look like. And by practicing and practicing, you will be able to really tell, okay, even before finishing the drawing, the shape per se, you will be able to tell, okay, this line is gonna be my main line, and this line is gonna be my main line. And this way you really start to highlight and to make lines stronger or weaker in your object, depends on your judgment, you know. And this skill, it can be gained only with like practicing and drawing and drawing and drawing. So the rule of drawing, in my opinion, is very simple. The more you draw, the more you will gain. Of course, to be able to draw, you might need some talents, of course, but we are not talking about being an artist. So I always say being an artist is, or being an artist and being able to draw are exactly, or like completely and definitely not the same things. They are completely different things. Like being an artist is, of course, I'm not going to talk about it now because our session is like took a little bit longer than I thought. But like being an artist is being able to really create something unique, something that only you can create. But being able to draw, yeah, this is a skill that you can really learn, you know, by practicing and practicing, and your hands is gonna be like stronger and stronger and stronger. So I always believed, and I still believe, everyone can draw by practicing. Of course, some people can move a little bit faster than others, but yeah, drawing all in all has some rules that like someone can follow, or we can follow. And yeah, just try it out. And perspectives are really important. Just like the last recommendation I want to give in this session, the recommendation is perspectives. Understanding perspectives is the key of drawing anything, even characters, not only buildings or very solid shapes. Okay, understanding perspectives is the key of being able to draw anything. And trust me on this, it doesn't matter if it's like simple cube or way too complex objects. So this is our session for today. Thank you very much for bearing with me and staying that long. Sorry if it took a little bit longer than I thought, but this was necessary. And as I said before, this is not everything about perspective. Of course, I can dive into details and make it like 10 or 20 hour session, but no, we'll stay until the end of I guess. So for now, let's move step by step and start with the basic knowledge. So try it out and yeah, enjoy. And thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.